Hello and welcome to Delta College Impact. I'm Roger Waller, your host for today's program. And on today's show, we're going to be talking with Dr. Bernie Horton, President and Superintendent of San Joaquin Delta College Community College District. And Dr. Horton has announced his retirement. We're going to be talking to him a little bit about some of his experiences, not only at Delta College, but in education. Dr. Horton, welcome to Delta College Impact. And when I say you've had years of experience in education, how many years has it been?
46 years.
46 years is amazing, and you actually started teaching. What was that first job? I guess you graduated from college just like everybody else, and you said, what am I going to do? And you opted to go into what profession?
Into teaching. Actually, I was a special student at the University of Cincinnati. They had 8 of us in a special education class for teacher education, and I worked on an internship in that program and then joined the Cincinnati Public School District as a junior high school science teacher.
That's amazing. Now, how long did you remain teaching junior high school?
Well, I was there 1 year. I had worked at the University of Cincinnati as a student, and I received 2 degrees from the University of Cincinnati. And I thought I enjoyed higher education better than junior high school education, so took a job at Washington State University as an administrator.
Terrific. And in administration, you started to work in what area primarily?
Well, I started out primarily in the so-called student center or college union business. I went to Washington State that had one of the most advanced college unions or college center programs. It was a beautiful facility, brand new, and I had an administrative job there, supervised a lot of different activities, and I stayed there 2 years. And then I didn't care for Pullman too much. The winters there are very difficult. And then I took a job as a director of a program at Forte State University in Hays, Kansas. And I was there 5 years. And then I went to Western Illinois University, a similar type of work, where I was an assistant vice president and stayed there 9 years. In the interim, I did have a sabbatical in that period and completed my doctorate. And then from there, I went into community college education. I was the executive director of the state trustees for the public community colleges. There are 39 districts in Illinois, so I represented them for 5 years. And then I took a presidency at Kankakee Community College in Illinois, and I was there 10 years. And then I came to Delta, where I've been for 12 years.
That's a great career. I think as you look back on it, one of the things I think is very interesting is the breadth of your experience, and that you covered not only junior high school teaching, but then you went to a university and you worked in the university environment. Then you worked in a statewide collegial administration role, and then to a presidency. Now, obviously, you've seen a lot of changes in education as you've had these different positions. What are some of those noteworthy changes that you've identified?
Well, I think in the comprehensiveness of the public colleges and universities, I was almost always in public education, and they were changing and broadening their curriculum and programs and services, and also the nature of the student body changed as well. Initially, it was more of an elitist type of involvement, and then the number of high school students increased substantially to where it's in probably more than 50, or approximately 50% right now. But I saw that, and I also saw it where predominantly men were attending colleges when I started, roughly 58%. And today, at least at Delta, it's 56 or 58% of our students are women. And so there's a gradual change in that regard. There are so many other changes, it's unbelievable. I could talk about a lot of things, but just almost the whole educational system has changed, and yet so much of it remained the same. Because when you talk about education and the disciplines and the body of knowledge, etc., that body of knowledge has changed unbelievably with electronics and the computer and so many other scientific and other inventions, that just the body of knowledge has changed remarkably.
Well, I guess that's true. I always think about it from a standpoint of learning history. that now we have 40 or 50 more years of history that students have to learn, if nothing else, from that standpoint. But as you look at that role in administration and at colleges, you were there during the turbulent 60s, as they say, and a lot of programs right now are making that retrospective look back into the 60s and 70s. How did you view it from an administrator's standpoint? Were you worried about that foundation of education really changing, or was it always that you felt that it was good to see students getting involved in not only education but in their society?
Well, initially I was rather shocked by some changes that took place. I remember in 1958, or 57 or 58 with Sputnik. The colleges were not well funded in the 50s, and then after Sputnik, education was well supported and encouraged, and I saw tremendous changes take place. And then in the 60s, the early 60s, we saw changes again with the tremendous growth of potential college students. And then, of course, we had the activism in the 60s, and I was in the thick of that, having supervised the fraternity, sorority, student activity, student government, the college center, etc. We had the Students for Democratic Society, or the SDS, and we had the Black Panthers, the White Panthers, and various other groups, and substantial changes were taking place. And I found it interesting, particularly the philosophies of different groups, and it was a worldwide movement. And I can still remember what was taking place in France, and Daniel Cohn-Bendit, who was a student leader, and his philosophy, which is one that I had never encountered before. I'm not certain I'm pronouncing the title or the name of it correctly, but it was a nihilism. Just to destroy for the sake of rebuilding, and they didn't know what they were really destroying or what they were rebuilding, but it was really interesting. And so I was in the forefront and had to confront a lot of different issues. And I won't go into too many of those because they're not too pleasant, but overall, those changes in the 60s, they were sometimes more radical than I would have wanted, but traditionally in society, when you have major changes, and that was a major change, the reformers may overstate or overreact in making the changes, but sooner or later, many of those changes get consolidated into the general culture. And I found that happening at the universities, and we needed changes. And so I was greatly encouraged by what transpired, and I think it opened up the system far better.
Oh, I'm sure. I think from the standpoint of certainly most change, I guess currently we look at coming out of a higher educational type of environment that fosters the free thinking and different ideas. Now, I'm sure your perspective of education was impacted by a number of leaders that you worked with. And who were some of the people that maybe had a big impact on your educational perspective and the way you dealt with issues in higher education?
Well, I was always fortunate in my respective responsibilities because I was traditionally in charge of the so-called artists and lecturers program, as well as pop concerts that the students basically handled. But in each of the colleges or universities where I worked, we had almost every top speaker come to those institutions. And whether it be Richard Nixon or whether it be Everett Dirksen or social reformers, and I think almost every top leader in the nation ultimately came to the campuses where I was involved. And I regret, in a way, not having them sign books or give me their autographs. And in fact, I feel really badly right now because I can't find a letter that was signed by Martin Luther King Jr. That was directed to me. And I was at an antiquarian book exhibit about a week ago in San Francisco, and I was looking through some letters, and there was one letter written on his stationery from the Ebenezer Baptist Church, and it was just signed Martin, and it was for sale for $12,000. Well, my letter was directly to me and signed by Martin Luther King Jr. And but I remember a lot of those experiences, and I could go on, whether it's entertainment, like the Chicago Symphony. We had them for 1 week one time, and I was in charge of that particular program. And just so many speakers And it's continuing even through today here at Delta, where the business the business group summit brings in outstanding speakers outstanding leaders really from the world.
And I guess that's really an exciting part of any college, is to get that student exposure to breadth of perspectives and breadth of leadership. And I know one of the other areas you've been very involved in is the arts, and your support of not only musical programs, but also artists as they come onto campus. And how have you seen that evolve over time? Because I know here at Delta College, we have really supported some of our own artists here on having artworks such as Cesar Chavez here on our library. How have you seen that impact?
Well, I've done a lot in that area just out of personal interest. Been in charge of the Artisan Lecture Series with all the musical groups, and we've had most of the outstanding artists. I remember one year going to the concert managers meeting in New York, and I went to the Saul Hurok agency representative, and I remember contracting through them with Van Cliburn to open our series, and then of course we had the Chicago Symphony for a week, but we always opened with the Chicago Symphony when I was at Western Illinois University, but only usually for one concert. And the year we had them for a week, we got a grant through the Illinois Arts Council. But that same time, we had Rudolf Verkushny, a famous pianist, and the Vienna Choir Boys, very popular group, and the Ballet Folklorico of Mexico. And that would be a typical type of schedule we'd have in any given year. And then, of course, in the visual arts, I've always had a special interest there, especially as it relates to history. So at different universities, I've done some things to build a collection, and that's one of the things I hope to strengthen a little bit more before I leave Delta, is to definitely have a start on original fine art and even some historical art, and have it placed throughout the campus.
Oh, that'd be great. Well, we've learned a little bit about Dr. Horton and his educational background and his experiences. And when we come back after this brief public service message, we're going to talk a little bit about the experiences here at Delta College and what he sees as some of the challenges of the future. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Delta College Impact. I'm Roger Wall, your host for today's program. And on today's show, we're talking with Dr. Bernie Horton, President and Superintendent of Delta College. And Dr. Horton has recently announced his retirement. We've been talking to him a little bit about some of his past experiences in education prior to Delta College. And we're going to ask him initially about an experience that he had that sort of combines Delta College and the entertainment world. Dr. Horton, you might want to share with us a little bit about that experience.
The other day I was visiting with my wife, and this was after the story appeared in the Record about Dave Brubeck having his records and information going to the archives of the University of the Pacific. And I indicated to my wife that our careers almost coincide because it was in the early 50s that Brubeck made the top of the charts. In fact, I remember I was a student volunteer in the activities program, and my job was to basically coordinate his concert with the administration at the University of Cincinnati. And that was the year that he had his Jazz Goes to College concert tour, which made him famous, and it's a major selling record. And of course, they did record the concert I was associated with, but the sound wasn't that good. But as the group went on to other universities, such as Oberlin, they did finally make a record on it. But prior to his coming, Billboard magazine, which was the #1 type of music magazine during that period, named him the top jazz concert artists, or his group. And he had Johnny Desmond on the alto sax and others. And I remember the problem we had trying to keep the crowd controlled in terms of getting into the hall and other problems. It was obviously sold out. And then later, after coming to Stockton, the University of the Pacific honored him as a distinguished graduate, and my wife and I had an opportunity to attend that event, and I mentioned this early concert. And of course now with him retiring, his records in the archives, or placing his records in the archives, I thought that was kind of apropos here. I started out as a young college student, and then to step out in retirement, and he's donating his records locally. But it's exciting to follow his career over this long period of time.
Oh, and the connections, because I know we're very proud of him as a former member of Stockton College over on the UOP campus.
Correct.
So that is terrific. Well, about 12 years ago, Dr. Horton joined Delta College as its president and superintendent. And I know one of the things that you had done during your career is you had to move. You and your wife had moved from Cincinnati, Ohio to Washington, to Kansas, to Illinois, and then to California. Now, once you come into a community, it has to be that challenge of trying to get connected to the community. What were some of those first steps that you took to try to learn about Stockton and to get connections to the community?
Well, that isn't too difficult. Although making I believe I had 7 different positions in my life, and it's interesting because that's what they're estimating the current generation will have in their professional lives. But it was very difficult to go from one university to another, one school system to another, particularly since colleges or universities or school districts didn't pay for the move. It wasn't until I got to be a chief executive officer heading up the State Trustees Association, I found things a lot easier. So it was difficult to make those moves, but my wife and I planned it reasonably well. We tried to move when our children were in certain grades. We tried to wait until, fortunately, we have twins, as well as a younger son, and they're 4 years apart. And so we could move when they're graduating from high school or graduating from the junior high school. So we tried to time our moves, and it worked out very well. But in going to a community, it wasn't difficult for us since I was involved in so many community-related endeavors, working for the College Center and in arts and entertainment and the fine arts, as well as the General College Union, which had food services and a lot of community-oriented things. We had a chance to really get greatly involved. And of course, we were always very active in the Presbyterian Church in different communities. And that was particularly important in Springfield, where we lived, Springfield, Illinois, the home of Abraham Lincoln, and we attended the same church that he and his family attended, and it's steeped in the Lincoln tradition. But it's not difficult, and then it's very easy once you become the head of an educational agency. Many people want you to be involved, and I found that as I went through several of these jobs, it was becoming redundant. You know, you go through the Rotary chairs, you go through the Symphony chairs, you go through United Way, and I've always been an active participant of many of these organizations. And when I finally got to Stockton, I found that it was really becoming almost too redundant. And so sometimes it's better when someone has that freshness and they're new to a community and have all that drive that they can bring to a community's leadership.
Yeah, I guess sometimes it's more of when to say no as opposed to getting involved. You have more than enough opportunity. Now, one of the things here at Delta College I know Dr. Horton's very proud of, and that's the appearance of the campus. And we're going to take a look at some of campus shots here at Delta College. And I think really one of the key things, Dr. Horton, is I know you've really stressed the appearance of the campus. And you might talk a little bit about how much you feel that influences the quality of our education.
Well, I've always felt it extremely important. I attended universities, and I thought there was a certain hypocrisy about it. Many times the buildings that I was in were unkempt or they weren't maintained properly. I remember taking my first course to become a teacher education, and they were talking about how important it was for students to have a certain ambience and a certain degree of attractiveness surrounding them, et cetera, and so forth, and I didn't see it. And so I've always been concerned about that. And then as I got more involved in university and with universities, I felt that here we're turning out engineers and we're turning out people in heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, particularly at a community college. We're turning out fine arts specialists and people who talk about philosophy, aesthetics, etc. And I just felt there was a certain hypocrisy, and that really we ought to practice what we preach. So I've always felt strongly about this, plus what the influence that cultural arts have upon employees in the student body or the students per se. And I just thought we ought to live it. That's one reason I came to Delta. I had actually done a great deal of work where I was in Illinois. It was a very unattractive campus. It was almost an embarrassment. And we were able to do some things to make it extremely attractive, particularly the buildings and grounds, and created a totally new environment. And so I was ready for a new challenge, and I saw what had been done here. So it isn't so much what I've done, is that I've continued a tradition that was started here a long time ago and that many other people have encouraged and maintained. And I'd always hoped to be a good steward in carrying on that tradition. And so until the last day I'm here, I'll work hard to continue to make further improvements.
Well, it certainly is a great-looking campus, as I hope all of our viewers know very well. One of the other things, I guess, as you look over the 12 years, you've had a lot of factors that you look back on with a great deal of pride and the impact that you've had on the campus here. What are some of those areas that you think have been some of the biggest strides that we've made during your tenure here at Delta?
Well, the one I really take the most pride in is the conveyance of learning. I feel so strongly that a college or university has to have a quality educational program with outstanding faculty and support staff. And I think the faculty at Delta are extremely strong. I think we try to bring about diversity, and we have quality. We have people who, what I call, are multidimensional. They're just not competent in their respective disciplines, but they also are empathetic to people in society. They traditionally volunteer to work in things that are of interest to them, and they stand for something. Sometimes it may not be my philosophy. Oftentimes it isn't, but at least they stand for something. And I think we have that type of faculty here. And also I think our academic programs and services, as well as our student services, have been customized to fit the student needs. And we have a lot of challenges in education today, and especially at San Joaquin Delta College, because approximately 75% of the students that come here are deficient in reading, writing, computational skills, as well as possibly speech and critical thinking methods. And these are some of the requirements that are required if they transfer to California State University or the University of California or private colleges and universities. So I think through some superb efforts of some wonderful people, particularly I want to highlight work in the Communication Skills Division, where I think they've done exemplary work in assisting students to be post-secondary education oriented, to be competent in certain areas, and to go on and transfer to a four-year college or university and excel.
Well, I think that's a tremendous statement right there about trying to provide the breadth of education and also oriented towards the community needs. And I think that's certainly the role of a community college. I know as we are just about at the end of the program that maybe we could touch on just a couple of the challenges that you see down the road for higher education here in California.
Well, something else I should have mentioned in terms of pride on the conveyance of learning, there's also the elements of skills and skill training that oftentimes are tied in with career education or vocational education. I think we've done a really good job there as well. We have some programs at Delta that are so outstanding. I know oftentimes we mention electron microscopy. That's because at one time it was the only program of its kind at a public community college in the nation. Right now it's only one of 2 programs in the nation. But that's indicative of what I think is changing. There's a need to stay current on the state of the art in terms of the professions as well as the skills or the technologies. And we've deliberately tried to do that. And I think we can take great pride in our classrooms and the method of instructions, the education of our staff, particularly being computer literate and being tied in with the latest technology. So I take great pride in San Joaquin Delta College as a truly comprehensive community college.
Well, we want to thank Dr. Horton for joining us today and to really thank him for his 12 years of service here at Delta. And we encourage all of you viewers to come on down and look at the campus and take a class and really experience some of this fine environment that we have down here. Well, thanks for watching Delta College Impact, and we encourage you to watch future programs. Thanks for watching.